on the Mandolin, and right now I'm getting ready to set up the truss rod. So here we go. I'm going to start with this medium-sized ball end, and I've already marked about where the truss rod's going to protrude through. I kind of think this is about the squared off part of it, and then it'll come out further yet, but that's okay. We just got to start somewhere, and this is where I picked. Alright, it's difficult to know exactly how I want the truss rod to fit in there yet. What I'm going to do is just put this rod through here, or I hope I will. It looks like it's going to be a little tight, actually. Alright, you might be able to see I've got a truss rod, or a rod, stuck down through here, just for a visual more than anything. And you know, I'm just kind of checking, do I think I have it about in the right place? It looks pretty good to me. I think I'm going to go ahead and where I've stopped right here, I think I'm going to chop this off straight down and widen it a little bit so that a flat washer could sit up against there. There needs to be a shelf there for a flat washer. So that looks good. I think the area I picked there is a good spot. And so now I'm going to put this bit in here, which has a flat end on it, and I'm going to come in here from this angle and go and work it out this way and try to flatten that off. I will tell you from years of experience, there's two problems. One is having this rub this here, so you got to be careful that you don't get it down here and have the chuck rubbing on the top here, because it make a mark. And the other thing is you want to have it at a pretty flat angle though, so you got to get it pretty close so that you get a good squared off end. And the final thing is that this thing rotating will grab and want to roll across. So you got to be careful. You got to have two hands on it. You know, could I do it with hand tools? Probably. Should I do it with hand tools? Maybe. But I'm doing it with this, and I hope I'll be successful here. So here we go. And I'm using this washer as my tester here, and certainly it's not big enough yet, but you know, you can always go bigger. It's much better to just take it real slow and sneak up on it. Okay, another real concern that you got to pay attention to is how deep you're going so that you don't go all the way through your peg head. That would really be bad. So I'm going to try to check and see how deep I've gone. And it's a little tricky to do that because you're kind of measuring an odd angle here. Okay, it looks like I'm at about 30 thousandths deep. And the overall thickness here is more like almost 600 thousandths deep. So I've got quite a bit to go yet. I'm about halfway, but you know, you got to get it deep enough to get your washer in there. Now you could, if you were on a thin peg head or something and you needed to make some room, you could flatten off your washer on the bottom side if that would help. And, you know, who knows, we might do that here, but I doubt it. I think we've got plenty of room. So I'm going to go ahead and go on down a little bit. That looks pretty close. I'm going to try some hand work on this to square it off a little bit more, but overall it looks pretty good. A little tidying up yet to go. Okay, we're pretty close. The washer still isn't down deep enough because it's still protruding through the top here just a tiny bit. And based on the thickness here, I think I've still got plenty of room, so we're going to go a little deeper. Got to be a little careful with this now. I've got the truss rod approximated to the size and shape that I want. I just bent this 3/16 inch bar. I like a little underbow, which is why I'm not using the standard truss rod that comes from like Stu Mac. I have this in stock, but I prefer to have a little underbow in the truss rod. So when you pull it tight, that pulls up. That straightens out and that pulls up on the neck, which takes that underbow out of the neck. So I like that better. Just pulling straight, yeah, it might help some, but this really helps a lot. So that's why I like to make my own and do it that way. In hindsight, it would probably been better to have drilled this hole before I had the neck attached to the body, but you know, hindsight's 20/20. I think that's as deep as I'm going to go. Just play it safe. It looks pretty deep down in there. I'm going to say it's roughly 3/4 of an inch deep, although I don't have any way to measure it real well. And that's a tight hole, I can tell you that. So we'll have to work on all that. I've just got it roughed out, and I've got the hole, you know, the hole's drilled, so I'm just approximating where it's going to go here. I know about how deep the hole is. It's probably a little less than 3/4 of an inch. And I'm at the top of the hole right now, so I'm just going to measure how high this is sticking up above there, and I may have to cut a little bit more of this off yet, probably will. I stuck a stick down in the hole to just see how deep we are in there, and we're just a hair, right about 5/8, maybe a hair shy of that. I'm going to stick this in here, see how far up it's sticking up, and then just know how much more of the rod I need to cut off. We're a little over 5/8. I'd like to cut at least 1/8 of an inch off of the rod yet, and that way I'll know I'll get it all the way down in there. We're going to put the threads on this rod now, and we've just about got her done, and once we get the threads on here, then we'll be able to install it. I've got a 1032 die in here, and I've got the shaft mounted in my vise right here. You know, I've tapered the end of the shaft so that the die should start a little easier. I'm hoping we can get it started this way. You know, I could do this in my metal lathe if I really had a problem, but generally these aren't that hard to do, so I'm going to give it a shot here. And you know, if you keep it good and level, then it'll start straight and thread straight, and shouldn't be a problem. Put a little bit of oil on it now. Little oil helps the die go around there and cut the threads better without tearing. On this small stock like this, and really anytime you're cutting threads, you're way better off to back up every little bit. Just cut about a quarter turn and back up and cut off the thread. Cut a little bit, back up and cut off the thread. But anyway, it's working real good. It's going right down. My die doesn't lock into this very well, and this is a homemade holder here that I made, but the die itself doesn't have any good notches on it. It's a piece of junk. It's a cheap die. Anyway, I'll tighten those up. That ought to make it hold good enough for this. You want a little more threads than you think you'll ever need, because otherwise you could bottom out on your threads, and that wouldn't be good. Did we cut as many threads as they cut on theirs, on the commercial one? No. May have to go a little more. Decided to go ahead and cut a little bit more threads on here, since the commercial one was considerably longer. I think that's plenty long for our purposes. And there you go. That's what a hand-cut thread looks like. Did a nice job cutting the threads. After cutting the threads, I was having trouble getting this nut to thread on there. It is just, to me, like the bolt that I just made is too big, and that's what it looks like to me. And so I'm trying to thread. Here's the factory one that was made by StewMac, and it doesn't thread on there either, although they're the same thread pitch. So what I did was I checked with the calipers, and this is at about 194, or 195 even, 0.195 we're talking, and this is at 0.87. So that's about 8 thousandths bigger. And that's significant when you're trying to put a nut on. So I'm going to see if I have another die that can reduce the size of this just a little bit more, because this is still just a little large. Well, I look for another die, and only other die I have in stock is this is a 1032 also, but it is shaped, you know, hexagon shaped, so it's not going to fit in my holder here. And I don't have a holder for that right now. So, what I think though, because it's hexagon shaped, I could just use a wrench and tighten it on there, as long as I can get it started. If I can get it started, then we should be able to just use a wrench or crescent wrench or anything and just work it on down. That cheap die just didn't cut it right, and this is a much better quality die. Old one, but it's better quality, so I think we can make it work with this. I think we're set up to try to recut these threads. I've got a crescent wrench on there, and that should make it work. I'm just chasing the threads that we've already cut, and I can see it is cutting some more, so I believe this is going to do the job correctly.
It's 5 o'clock and one more working day is finally at an end. I hurry from my job and start the car and fight.
Okay, that did a much better job, I can tell. So let's see if the nut goes on there now. No problem. Perfect. Perfect. So there you go. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with how everything fits up, except that you also have to be able to get a nut driver on the end of this, and right now this is still too narrow through here to get a nut driver on there to tighten it up. So we've got to work on that next.
A lot of woman there, and pretty soon that's where I'm gonna be. I'm the only one that's missing. I'm the one the in crowd's waiting for. I drive around the back and park my car, then I open up the door. And there stands the in crowd. They're not the sin crowd. They're the light of my life crowd. My kids and my wife crowd. She hands me my coffee, and the kids gather around me. It makes me so proud to be in with the in my life crowd, my kids and my wife crowd. She hands me my coffee, and the kids gather around me. It makes me so proud.
I'm getting ready to super glue this little strip of wood in here. It's a filler for underneath this truss rod is what it is. And I'm putting it in the slot right now, dropping it in here, and going to back it up to right next to the rod hole there, and got her in there, and I'm going to make sure it's pressed down real good. Then we're going to spritz it with this stuff. Make sure it sets up good. I don't know if you can see it there, but the hole is right behind it. We're going to put the rod in there eventually. Might as well. And so we can put the rod down in there now, and then I'll fill this hole behind here, and I'll fill above this rod too. And of course now the rod's fighting me. I probably got that thing glued in there in a slightly different spot than I thought, and it's pushing up on the rod here a little bit now, which, you know, I test fitted it about a dozen times off camera, but yet it still gives you trouble when you finally glue it in there, of course, wouldn't you know? But it's not bad, it's just a little bit, and I may have to just take the rod back out and straighten the rod just a tiny bit to get it to lay down in there better. Actually, it's right about in here, so maybe I'll scrape a little bit off with the scraper. Sprung back up just a little bit, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem, because I can push it down right here, and that will probably take up all the difference that I care about. Now I'm putting the truss nut on here, and you can see I've got that fitting up pretty good. And I'm going to push it down as I tighten it a little bit to see if it stays down. As long as it stays down, we're good. Yeah, it stays down, no problem. And it's below the surface here, so we're in very good shape. Just working on it. Gonna put this last little piece in here, and then I think we're good for this part. I've got the filler strip made. That, well, it's in there pretty tight. I've got it jammed in there. It goes back underneath the peg head here. You know, once again, this would have been better if I'd have put this in here before I did the peg head veneer, but you know, it is what it is. And it works this way, and it's going to be fine. I've, you know, trimmed it with my sander until I got it where it just fits back up in there, and basically it runs right up behind the washer here. So, and then what we'll do is we'll glue that in place and cut this off flush. And then we'll fill this one little hole back here, and the only thing that'll be exposed is that little bit of metal right there, but that's going to be, it's still below the surface, so it's not a problem. And that should work real good. That should work real good. That'll give a nice underbow to that truss rod, so when you tighten this, it'll definitely pull this up. It won't take a lot of torque to pull that up, versus the other way when they're straight like that. They don't do too much other than stiffen the neck. So I prefer them this way. I went ahead and trimmed this piece off flush. Now I'm going to take super glue and just let it work its way into that little seam there, just lightly, so that it doesn't, you know, I don't want to get a ton of super glue down in there and glue my rod. I fitted a piece of wood that fits down in there real snug against this back of the truss rod there, and it fits up to this. It goes all the way down in there. I've already drawn a line across here where I'm going to cut it off. So we're going to go do that right now. Because I'm not worried about anything gluing up on this, I'm just going to go ahead and coat this with Tite Bond. It's real nice. Now that neck's real solid. You know, I expected to see this. That's not a mistake. That's exactly how I planned it to come out. So everything looks good. I don't think it could be much better. That'll be a really solid neck with a very good truss rod. That'll work really well. I've left these little blocks a little bit proud. This one's still wet, I'm sure. I'm not going to be able to work on it, but I'm going to go ahead and level this one off because it was glued with super glue. In hindsight, I probably should have just used super glue on that to make it faster. But that'll be a good strong joint, so I'm just going to plane this level with my little plane here, and then we'll scrape it flat. pretty good already. Didn't take much. And I'll just try a single edge razor blade for a scraper. That should be good. Nice and smooth. So now our fretboard lays on there good. Okay. Looks good.